An early game hurdle is oil production, and there's two parts to oil production. There's obviously the harvesting of the oil, and then there's the processing of the oil. First thing, how do you harvest oil? Well, what you're looking for on map-wise is you're looking for these pink dots which tell you where there is crude oil, okay? And as you can see, we've got 3 different patches here. So we'll go and harvest this one. When you get to the oil patch, what you're looking for is these things. These are actually only hidden by the terrain decals, but basically you're looking for these black patches. Yeah, there we go. So these are a bit clearer. So this is what they look like when you get to them. They will almost certainly be hidden by trees. They're often, trees around or grass, and you can see them. To very quickly and easily identify them, you're going to want to use the building that you use to harvest oil, which is the pump jack. Pump jack is a research you need to do. Get some of them. And basically, when you hold a pump jack, a bit like with mining drills, where it will tell you where you can place them by going this weird colour, when you hold a pump jack, it tells you where the oil patches are. So you can nice and easily see them. So we know we've got 3 oil patches. Pump jacks have a weird configuration to them, in that when we turn a mining drill round, the arrow, the output point, stays exactly the same place relative to the position. So it just simply rotates around. You see it's in the middle, it's in the middle, it's in the middle, it's in the middle. But it doesn't matter what orientation you put it in, it puts the output to it in the middle. Pump jacks do not work that way. Instead, with pump jacks, as you rotate them round, this moves to basically one of 2 corners. So the corner for the output of pump jacks is always on the top right or the bottom left. So it doesn't matter how you rotate them, you cannot get them to output on the top left or bottom right. They're always going to output there. Now it's obviously directionally different, so it's going down there, to the left, to the up, to the right. So it does change that way, but where that is, it doesn't. You would expect if you rotate that round. I wonder if no, you cannot flip them either, you see. So you will always have to deal with the output being on the side of the building, and that side changes. So you cannot simply rotate them around in a sort of normal way like other buildings. What that means is that when you've got them close together, you have to do sort of a bit of pipe spaghetti to combine them together. Because what we want to do with these is we want to process them into the 3 oil products. Now, what I typically do when I harvest oil is I have all of the pump jacks kind of feeding into a single line. Okay, so if we imagine that there's a single pipeline that we want to feed these into, then we can hook all of those up. Now, sometimes I do combine them together, have 2 pump jacks outputs together. So if there was another one, say here, we might put, or there or something, we might put that way around and have both of them output together. Sometimes do mini spaghetti, but generally speaking, you want all of the outputs to go into a single pipeline, because that then lets you basically deal with one source of crude oil. So let's power these up. A pump jack has an internal buffer. We have a bonus from a prod bonus because I'm in cheat mode, and that's what this extra line is here. But what they're also doing in particular is filling up the actual pipeline. So as you can see, this is saying 39, 42, 43, and you see it's pulsing. As these output, that splurges in waves. So as that comes out and hits this end point here, it then goes into the pipe, and you see it causes it to surge in its output. So unlike a miner where it's at a constant rate, that surge and filling of the pipe will be asynchronous. It will be all over the place, basically. So you have to think in terms of averages. So once these guys have filled up this pipe set, they will then stop, because you see this is now saying 100 of 100, so it's all full, and they're still going. So they are filling an internal buffer, and that will keep going for a little while. So unlike mining drills, which don't have a buffer, these do. So that helps you even out that supply and demand problem. Okay, so that's the basics of how you harvest the material. Now you can take pipes a long way. There is a restriction from version 2.0 on the maximum pipe length that you can use, but all that means is you just need to put in a pump every so often, and that just lets you push the material along, and it gets around this this length restriction. So you just need pumps in, and they will take care of that issue. Probably do a separate thing on that. But basically what you want to do with this is almost certainly put it into a train. So using most standard naming convention, I would call this fluid oil pickup. Might call it fill up or something like that. Okay, and then we put the train in, and we have to use fluid wagons to transport fluids. Okay, fluid wagons can only be filled by pumps. Pumps can be placed at any of the locations along the side of the train, but each of these visual tanks, these things here, is a separate connection point for a pump. So a pump can only attach to the middle point, and only a single pump can attach to that middle point. So if we put pumps like that, and then we fill it all up, we will see that only these ones on the left have attached. Also they didn't have power. But you can see we can add power and nothing happens. So if I take this one out, then that one will attach. Okay. As it happens, it seems to have done all three. I wonder if that's interesting. That's interesting. Anyway, I'm not sure why all three could disconnected and connected. That was a bit odd. But basically, yeah. So if you want to do multiple inputs, you can put them on either side. You can also put them in either place. So it doesn't matter if they're at the top or the bottom. So effectively a train for fluids only has 3 loading points. With a normal wagon you could put, chests all along here, have inserters on either side, fill it up with up to 12 inserters in a normal build. So that's the sort of difference. But these guys have a huge throughput. So these guys will absolutely hammer that in. As you can see, 1200 fluids per second, and this thing only holds 50,000. So in a few seconds, one pump will fill them up, basically. So it's not generally a throughput issue. If you want to buffer, like you do with chests, then you would use storage tanks. Okay, so you would connect, for example, this here, and now we have this as our buffer, and these will pump it in, and as you can see, it is filling it pretty quickly. What we'd normally do, in the same way with normal trains, is you buffer this so that when the train arrives, it can suck all the stuff out of these 2 tanks and then go. And then these slowly and steadily fill up the tanks. Okay. Same with unloading. You can only unload from the same position. So it can only unload in 3 possible points. So if we were to do something like that, this pump is now taking out of the wagon where those 2 are filling it in. So that's the basics of loading fluids into trains. Something that can happen is, unlike cargo wagons, they're a lot more tolerant of you doing things on angles. So if you had your station here, for example, then it would be okay with you putting weird chests around here and putting material in via long-handeds and all that sort of stuff. You can do that sort of stuff with normal wagons. You cannot do that with fluid wagons. They need to be on a horizontal. Now this one could be on a curve. You could do that. But if you want the wagons to be done, they need to be on horizontal, and your actual stop needs to be in line with them. If you try and do anything like... So if you had your stop here, for example, and then you got a couple of trains, say there, you're doing some train spaghetti madness. Now, if you, had this sort of setup where you've got your train, it's on a straight, so it's fine, and the train will pull up and all that sort of stuff, you'll notice that this is now not connected. Even though it looks like it's basically the same thing, it isn't, because the curves change the alignment of the track, basically. So, or rather, change the position of the train in its alignment to the track. So, although that probably looks like it's almost exactly the same as a normal stop, it isn't. And so that can be something that trips people up. They basically think, well, why isn't this loading? And it's not loading because it's not in the exact position it needs to be for a pump to connect to it. Okay, so that's something to watch out for. Let's assume that this represents both a pickup and a drop-off. And so we're pulling out our fluid here, and we want to process this oil. Very early game, it gives you basic oil processing technology. And what that allows you to do is use a oil refinery on its own, and you select this basic oil processing. You obviously got to give it some power, and then you connect to the appropriate symbol, and away you go. So it will output petroleum gas, which is the very basic stuff that comes out of oil processing, and nothing else. There's no byproducts, there's nothing else to deal with. It's just that. If you're doing blue science, all you need to do is convert that using a lab into sulfur. Okay. However, you do that by providing water as well. So you notice now we've got two inputs for our chemical lab. Say this came up here, we built this line, and we were trying to make sulfur there. Okay, so what we would need to do is we would need to connect. This would be a very, very simple, very, very basic setup. We would need to connect the petroleum, but if we do it like this, notice that the water is there. Now what we can use is underground pipes to avoid any kind of mixing of fluids. So that's one option. You could do something like that. Another option that came in with version 2 is you can now flip chemical labs. So you could flip that horizontally by pressing H, and flip that one horizontally by pressing H. And what you've now got is you've got some nice, easy to connect labs like that, and you can just do a nice simple line across there, and then same with these. You could do 2 there, and then wherever your water's coming from, grab it from somewhere else. Or perhaps we do something like that. Because what you need to avoid with pipes is pipe mixing. It would generally not try to stop you from pipe mixing, but it's not always 100% reliable. So you need to make sure that what you want is connected to the right thing, and there's no pipes connecting together. So if I do that, and I try and connect this, we're now, in theory, trying to pump where we want water. We're accidentally getting petroleum gas, and we don't want that. We want separate fluids going in the thing. So that's very, very basic oil processing, and this will get you the sulfur you need in order to do blue science, and that's all we really need to think about. And I say there's all sorts of different ways of connecting these up, flipping them round. You can the more traditional orientation that we all used to have to use, and still obviously works, is putting a gap between these to avoid mixing, basically. Well, I say this is how I always did it anyway. So you then have that. Boop, boop, oops. There, for example, and then you just do that as 2, and then they're not going to mix together. And then you can take your water. Your water could be coming in here, for example. Yeah. So there's all sorts of different ways of configuring this, but the key point is that you need to match up whatever you're trying to put in to the pipe that's got it in, and you need to avoid mixing and contamination. And mixing and contamination happens with regular pipes. Okay, undergrounds will never mix and contaminate directly. So if I put one here, those are connecting across, but they're not cross-connecting to that one above it. It's only regular pipes that can mix and cross-contaminate. Eventually, one of the researches you'll do is advanced oil processing. Okay, advanced oil processing is this one here, and that then introduces the similar complexity of having to provide water to your oil refineries. Okay, once you do that, once it's got those, this recipe now produces heavy oil and light oil, and I'll pick up in a separate quick tutorial about dealing with those, because that's a whole separate topic. But basically the point is that after a while you get a research that gives you the heavy and light oil. If all you're trying to do is produce sulfur or any other material, any other something or other that uses petroleum, so for example plastics simply uses petroleum, it's perfectly fine to stick with basic oil processing, and it will output what you need where you need it. It's less efficient, it gives you less of it, but to some extent, who cares? Yeah? If all you're trying to do is finish the game, and you want to produce sulfur, and from that you can produce sulfuric acid, all you have to do is have some basic oil processing that you either deliver via pipes or put that fluid on a train and deliver it via train and make your sulfur. That's all you need to do. There's no need to mess about with this until you need the heavy oil and light oil products.